Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. Your hosts for today's podcast are Bela Musitz and Mike Wasserman. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hi, Bela. I'm great. How are you? What's new in your world?
Well, I've been sick. So, as you recall, we were supposed to record last Friday, almost a week ago. And in spite of having 2 COVID shots, a booster shot, and a flu shot, I got sick. And I had some kind of flu-like symptoms, and it kind of knocked me out for a few days. And today's really the first day that I feel reasonably well.
Bummer.
Yeah. So I don't know what it was. It wasn't COVID. I had a negative COVID test. So, I know it's not COVID, but still, last year I didn't get sick at all, because we were so careful in washing our hands and wearing face masks everywhere and all that kind of stuff. And that's all sort of relaxed a little bit now, it seems. And lo and behold, wham, I got whacked with something.
Agreed. I got a cold too for the first time in a year. It was a couple months ago, and I'm not, I have a doctorate, but I'm not that kind of doctor. But I just wondered too if the immune system, not having been in contact with lots of germs, was a little bit depressed as well. Because I was worse than normal, or worse than pre-COVID cold. But well, I hope you get better soon. And here in Germany, they say get into a warm bath and take 2 beers with you and put the beers in the warm water and drink the 2 warm beers, and that'll cure you. I've never tried this, but this is what people say.
I've heard the warm bath before. I can remember my mom doing that to me when I was a kid. Try it with 2 bottles of beer. Yeah, boy, if I had 2 bottles of beer in a warm bath, you would find me in the morning.
I think so. I think you'll sleep like a baby.
Yeah. Wow. So that's nothing else much going on. It's fall time here, and the weather's nice. We get these nice, beautiful days when it's 60 or 70 degrees out and it's gorgeous, and then we get other days when it's 45 and kind of rainy.
Yeah, same here. It's cloudy and rainy here as well, and it's getting dark early, and definitely cooling down at night, and you feel it's coming. Winter's coming. So
yeah. Well, speaking of cool at nights, the last time we were on the boat, we actually had to turn the heat on. So if you remember, the boat has air conditioning, and I had to replace one of the units because something the surveyor missed. But these are dual-purpose units, so it's actually a heat pump. So it can be an air conditioner or it can be heat. And the last time I was on the boat, Elaine and I, and one of the mornings we woke up and, man, it was like 45 degrees out or 40 degrees or something like that. It was chill. It was low 40s. And it cooled down in the boat. It was like 52 or so. And so, I kicked on okay, let's try the heat. So we kicked it on, and lo and behold, in 15 minutes, it warmed the boat up nice and toasty. And it was quite nice in there. So it was good.
Excellent. Good test if you really need it, right? If you do an Arctic sail or an Antarctic sail, you want to make sure that thing works.
Yeah. I just want to make sure it works when it's 40.
Yeah. So how was your last sail?
Yeah. So the last sail was good. So actually, the time we turned on the heat pump, the heat was the previous time when Elaine and I were out. But just before I got sick, I went out with my son for a long weekend, Jason, my older son. And he was able to escape from the kids for a long weekend. And we had a really, really nice sail. If you remember back in episode 35, I described the week we had together with his family, his 2 daughters and his wife, and Elaine and I on the boat. And that was a great trip. And Jason said, gee, he'd like to come back for kind of a long weekend, just the 2 of us. So we did that, and man, it was really, really quite nice. And so we drove down Friday night after work. Jason still works; he's not retired like me. And we got to the marina I got around 9 o'clock, I guess it was, and we sort of settled in and had breakfast in the morning, and I think dropped the dock lines around 9:30, 10 o'clock or so, and motored out of the marina.
Nice. Now, how was the weather? I know, I don't know much, but I know that autumn can be a bit tricky for sailing this late in the season.
Yeah, unlike the forecast, which said it was supposed to be a pretty sunny weekend, I don't think we saw the sun at all. And it was cool. So I will say I had on my long johns, and I had on a fleece jacket with my rain gear jacket on top of it. And my rain jacket that I have on the boat is almost like a winter parka. So it's not just a thin shell. It's a Helly Hansen. You could use it in the winter if you wanted to, and a wool hat. So it was cool, and it was nice and breezy, and it was interesting in that the wind on Narragansett Bay is typically from the south, and this wind was from the east. So it was an unusual wind. But the good news is when the wind is from the east, since the bay runs north-south, for sailing, that is perfect. You can basically just go straight up and down the bay. And because when the wind's from the south, you're basically going into the wind and you have to tack and go back and forth and back and forth. But with the wind from the east or the west, man, it just makes it great. So we ran straight down the bay, right from the marina. As soon as we got out of the marina, we hoisted the sails, and we went all the way down to Newport on one tack. Which I've never done that before. This was the first time that happened, and we had 10 to 15 knots of wind, and man, it was really, really nice.
Cool. Now, tell me about the route. What do you see on that run?
Yeah, so we go down out of the marina. We go past Connecut Point, which is a big, long, shallow sandbar finger that sticks out that has an old lighthouse on the end of it. So that's kind of cool. You go by this old lighthouse, and it still has a functioning flashing light on it. But as with most lighthouses, they're not really used for navigation anymore. They don't have the typical beam that's flashing around all night long. But it's a real neat looking lighthouse, and we sail past that, and then we go down past Prudence Island, which sort of divides the bay into a sort of east passage and a west passage. So there's kind of two channels in the bay. One that goes down the east side of it, and one that sort of goes down the west side of it. And Prudence Island sort of begins separating those two. And Prudence Island is an island, as it says, that's only accessible by ferry. There's a whole bunch of summer homes on it. And I think, if I remember reading correctly, there are some full-time residents that live on the island. And, there's not a regularly scheduled ferry. So I'm not quite sure how it works. I don't know if it's one of those things where the people who live on the island, if you need to go to shore, you grab one of your neighbors and they drive the boat and they drive you over to shore. I'm not quite sure how that works. But it's a nice size island, and some really nice homes on it. So you sail down past that, and which was quite nice. And then as you sort of start going down towards the further south you go, I will say the homes start getting more and more expensive. So as the closer you get to Newport and the closer you sort of get to the mouth of the bay, the homes start getting a little larger and a little more expensive. And go ahead.
No, that makes sense, right? And I think location, right? And that's interesting that it holds for the shoreline properties as well.
Yeah, it sure does. And then of course, eventually, you start going past Jamestown Island, which is south of Prudence Island, and that too divides the bay to east and west passages, and eventually you go under the Newport Bridge, or it's actually the Pell Bridge, but everyone calls it the Newport Bridge, and then you're really close. That's just north of Newport, and that connects sort of Newport mainland, if you will, to Jamestown Island. and it's a large suspension bridge. So I always enjoy going underneath these big, large bridges. Being an engineer, I always look up at them, and I'm just marveled at we can actually make something like that, and it stands, and it carries traffic and all that kind of stuff. So that was really kind of cool. I always enjoy going under a big bridge. And the closer we got to Newport, the busier it got. Even though it was sort of a cloudy day, it was Saturday. It was Columbus Day weekend. So it's, sort of a pseudo holiday over here. And there was a lot of boats out on the water. And in Newport, they have several of the old 12-meter America's Cup boats. So these are not the fancy catamarans that the America's Cup people race these days and the foiling sailboats, but the old-fashioned long 12 meters long sailboats that they had that are just a classic-looking sailboat. And they have a few of those there that they take people out on. You can go sail for a couple hours for a little joyride. And we saw two of them. They were taking passengers out for sailing, and we sailed by them. So that's always a nice sight to see. And then we sailed down past Newport, and then you quickly get dumped out into Long Island Sound.
And that's open water, right? I mean, how did that go?
Yeah, it is open water. And, once we got past, since the wind was from the east, as we're coming down that passage, the land is blocking all the wind. And then once you sort of go past Newport and past Castle Hill Lighthouse, all of a sudden the land is not blocking the wind anymore. And more importantly, the land's not blocking the waves either. And it was amazing how, when I'm out on my boat on Narragansett Bay, it's a 45-foot boat. It's a good-sized boat. The boat feels pretty big, and I feel, this is a nice big-sized boat. And we got out into Long Island Sound there, and, the waves got big. We probably had, it's hard for me to judge waves, and I'm sure it's like, when I tell people about the fish I catch, I always exaggerate how big they are. And I'm sure sailors do the same thing with waves. But let me just say the boat was going up and down pretty good. And all of a sudden, that 45-foot boat felt kind of small. I will say.
Interesting.
I will say that. Yeah. And so what we did is we sailed down past what's called Beavertail. It's an island that's just south of Jamestown. And it's called Beavertail Island because it's shaped like a beaver tail. And it's got a lighthouse. Again, it's got a lighthouse out on the end of it. And there's always lots and lots of lighthouses around the bay, as I said before. And so that basically go around the corner, around Beavertail, and then we head up what's called the West Passage, which is basically the other side of those islands we came down. And we started heading back up towards the marina. And then you go underneath the what's called the Jamestown Verrazano Bridge. And I got to look up, what the story with Verrazano is, right? Because there's the Verrazano Bridge in New York City.
New York City, yeah.
Yeah, and this one is called the Jamestown Verrazano Bridge. So I should know who Mr. Verrazano was. We should look that up. It must be someone famous because he's got more than one bridge named after him.
So Giovanni de Verrazano was an Italian explorer of North America, and he worked for King Francis I of France. And he's known as the first European to explore the Atlantic coast of North America between Florida and New Brunswick in 1524, including he was the first, obviously, non-native person to claim that he discovered the New York Bay and Narragansett Bay. So that's why they named those bridges after him.
There you go.
I looked that up. I didn't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah. Well, great. So we go underneath the Jamestown Verrazano Bridge. We're going up the West Passage now, which is not sort of the main channel. So most of the shipping goes up the east side. So there's no big ships to worry about here, but it's still sort of a real channel. And we go past Quonset. I may not be saying that properly. And General Dynamics has a big facility there. It's called General Dynamics Electric Boat. And electric boats basically is code name for submarines. So they make parts of and components for submarines there. in a big facility that you can see sort of from the water as you sail by it. So that's kind of neat to see that. Every once in a while, you might see a submarine there, but it's pretty rare. And then back up, continue coming north, back up the other side of Prudence Island and Patience Island, and up past the Connecut Point Lighthouse. And yeah, so it was a nice long trip.
Sounds nice, Bela. Now, one of the problems I think of sailing in the autumn is you lose daylight quickly, at least in my part of the world, and my memory of New York is the same. And I'm still a little uncomfortable with the idea of sailing at night. I mean, you have no headlights, no high beams, there's not a lot of street lights. Talk me through this a little bit in terms of when it got dark and what you do differently once it gets dark.
Yeah, we did get back in the dark. That's a good point, Mike. It's amazing how, during July and August, it's light till 8:30, 9 o'clock is just getting dusk, and it was like 5 o'clock and it was getting dusk. And we sort of knew we were going to maybe be coming back in the dark when we decided to go this far. And, it's totally different out there. And the biggest challenge I have in the dark is that my brain confuses the intensity of the light with how far away it is, right? My brain thinks the dimmer the light, the further away it is, and the brighter the light, the closer it is. And that's not necessarily true because lights are different intensities. So I always find that to be a challenge. So judging distances at night is really, really challenging. And particularly when you're surrounded by land, like we are, as we're starting to come back up into the northern part of the bay, the land starts getting close on either side. You see cars, you see street lights, you see tail lights from cars, and the buoys are red and green, and street lights are red and green, and car tail lights are red, and boat lights are red, green, and white. Car headlights are white. So it can get very, very confusing. So that is always interesting. I'm always very cautious. The area was familiar, so it's a place now I'd sailed all summer, so I sort of have an idea for where stuff should be. I have a mental map of it. Of course, I have my GPS in front of me that shows me where everything is. And it's interesting that the marina, which is in Bullock Cove, has a pretty narrow entrance into it because it's pretty shallow, but they dredged out a narrow entrance. And so there's buoys that mark the entrance all along the way. But the only buoy that's lit is the very first green marker. So you can find that one, but after that, you sort of have to be able to, again, you have the GPS, so that helps you, but you have to be able to see. And it wasn't one of those pitch black dark nights where you can't see anything. And the buoys are pretty close together, so you can kind of track one to the other. But yeah, we got back fine. I think it was right close to 8 o'clock by the time we got the boat tied up. And it was about a 40-mile trip for the day, which was, I think, one of our longer, if not the longest trip for the season, one-day trip in the season. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds awesome, Bela. So what's next? Do you have more sailing planned, or is that it for the season?
Yeah, sadly, that's it for the season. I'm going down actually tomorrow to start the winterizing process for the boat. And so, it's always a sad day. There's kind of a two-step process. There's certain things I do to the boat while it's still in the water. And then once it's hauled out of the water, then I'll go back down for another day to do some other things on a boat. So it's sort of a two-step process the way that I do it. I'm sure there's many, many different ways of winterizing a boat, and people do it all different ways. But I tend to winterize the water system and the engine and the generator while it's in the water. And then when it comes out of the water, that's when I put the cover on it and take the sails off and do some of those other types of things. So, yeah. So that's what's next.
Sounds like a whole nother episode worth of adventure, huh?
Yeah, I think so. We did an episode on winterizing it last time, so we'll see how it goes this time, and maybe we'll do an update to that episode and just
Yeah.
sort of things that I've learned the first time I did it. There are a few different things I'm going to do differently this time, particularly on sort of trying to winterize the water system. That's kind of the trickiest part because it's there's 3 sinks, there's 2 toilets, so there's 2 shower heads. There's a outside shower, so there's a lot of water hoses running around, and you got to sort of fill them all up. And there's a water tank, a water heater tank, I should say, and 3 water tanks that store water. So you got to empty all those tanks. You got to get all the stuff out of the lines, and you got to fill everything up with sort of non-toxic antifreeze. So there's got to be a simpler way to do it than I'm doing it, but it's I'll get there someday.
Yeah, it's a process, isn't it? So, any insights as you wrap up? This was your first full season with Paradox. Anything strike you as worth talking about in our last few minutes?
That's a good question, Mike. It was just a great season. It really met my expectations. I had great times on the boat with the family, which was sort of one of the big reasons for getting it. Week-long vacation with Jason and his kids and his wife, and then with Andy, who lives real close by. They came out a bunch of times for day trips. And the boat's just working great for our intended use. So it's kind of the way we use the boat. It's spacious, it's comfortable, it's big. It really, really works well for us. And, that's the whole thing about buying a boat. People anguish about buying boats. And I think sometimes people get wrapped up in sort of thinking they're going to sail around the world or going to sail across oceans. And, those types of boats are very different than kind of the day sailor, the coastal cruiser boat that I have. The kind of the design parameters are different. It's just like cars, right? There's different cars for different intended purposes. And so I think you have to be really honest with yourself and say, how am I going to realistically use my boat 90% of the time? And you want to, pick out a boat that's sort of targeted at that set of design parameters. Which I think is working very well for us with our Hunter 45-foot Dexalon. It's been working out really good. And so really looking forward to next season. I'm already starting to think about it and thinking about trips and where we can go and looking forward to it.
Nice. Maybe we could put together kind of a list of goals that you have going into season 2. And then at the end of the season, right, we can kind of see what happened. And I mean, maybe even we could go back to our first episode when we kind of talked about you buying the boat and the decisions you made. I mean, it's a big investment, right? And to look back and say, yeah, I've really felt like I've gotten a good return on my investment. I think that's really cool. So I think that's fun to maybe we can take a look back and then take a look forward at the same time. Would be kind of cool. But yeah, I think let's wrap it up, Bela. This was a neat last trip of the 2021 sailing season. Had some great winds that were rare and saw some beautiful sights and bundled up and feeling the weather change. So this was great. Listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode. We hope you found our conversation interesting and thought-provoking. If you have questions about what we discussed today, as always, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
So if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting application. Hey, and if you know someone that would make a good guest on the show, I'm always interested in interviewing some interesting people who are in the sailing, boating, and marine industry. So if you know someone, send them our way, and I'd love to have them as a guest on the show. And hope to see you out on the water next summer. I'll be winterizing the boat for the next couple of trips. And so until next time, signing off from starting to get very chilly upstate New York. See you soon, Mike.
Sounds great, Bela. From over here in a kind of a cool and rainy Münster, Germany. See you next time.